Good afternoon. I'm Monique Bork with the Oregon Secretary of State's Office of Small Business Assistance. I'm here today with Greg McAllister, a small business advocate with the Office of Small Business Assistance. We're going to be going over some of the things that you need to know if you're hoping to start and run a successful online retail shop. So, Greg, let's start with one of the first questions that a new business owner needs to deal with. What are the licensing and registration requirements for establishing and running an online retail shop in Oregon?
That's a really good question. It is probably the one we get most about this type of business, right? The answer, in short, is not a lot. It's not online retail that is what's being licensed or regulated, really. So generally speaking, any kind of online retail business is just going to be subject to the basic requirements that apply to any business that's operating in Oregon. So that would be registering, whether it's an assumed business name or an entity like an LLC, limited liability company, or a corporation. We would register those with the Secretary of State. And then depending on what city somebody's in, they might need a local city business license. They might need a home occupation permit. I think most of the people we speak to who are going to be doing online retail are running that business from their home. If you're running your business from a home, then you're what's considered a home occupation. And there's a good chance your city is going to want you to have a home occupation permit. And even if they don't have a permit, they may want you to get a business license or just register in a way with the city, because there are just rules around things people can or can't do when they're running a business from their home. Because without going into a lot of detail, they want to make sure people aren't doing things or operating in a way where they're really disrupting the neighborhood and the residential nature of the area. So, but if they're selling something that the actual item or the type of items they're selling are regulated, then that's where they'll be looking at what falls into that sort of regulation zone. And in that case, it's really just going to depend on what that inventory is, and then they'll just need to work with the actual agency that regulates that. If you don't know whether or not what you want to sell has specific regulations or an agency or a program that regulates it, then there's a business license directory that you can find online at a website called Business Xpress. We administer that website from this office. It's not 100% comprehensive because we do have to work with other agencies and their programs to keep it up to date. If you can't find anything there, or if you just don't feel comfortable or you want to make sure, you can always reach out to us. If you're wanting to sell something and you don't know whether or not your items are going to be regulated, you can always call us. Honestly, the most common things we hear about in this office for online retail would be clothing and probably like handmade craft type items or goods. Those are rarely going to have real, like a license or any kind of a state agency that's regulating it. But again, you can always ask. There's nothing wrong with double checking and making sure.
Well, other than possibly fewer licensing and registration requirements, what are the chief advantages of running an online business over a brick and mortar shop?
Um, Probably the savings that someone would have on the overhead, right? So if you're leasing out a commercial space, that's obviously going to cost money. If you are running an online business, like I said, at least most of the people who we're hearing from in this office are doing that from their home. And in that way, they save on the initial overhead. Maybe they plan on expanding someday to a commercial space, but in the opening stages there, they save some money on that. They can run it from their home, maybe store things in the garage, in the attic. Do keep in mind that if you are running a home occupation, the city or the county may have rules or concerns around what you're storing or how much of it or how you're storing certain kinds of things. But every city in the state is really in charge or has discretion over whether or not they're going to have a home occupation permit and what kinds of specific rules they may have around it. Just check with your city, I suppose, just to make sure that you're okay on that front. You can usually find it on the website or just call them and ask. And if the person who answers the phone doesn't know, they can connect you to whoever does. But yeah, sorry, to come back to the original point, the main benefit I would say is going to be saving money on not having to lease that commercial space.
How about downsides?
Well, I guess the downsides would be not having the advantages that an actual commercial space might bring. So if we're talking about a retail business, then usually if you're looking for an actual commercial location outside your home and you're not going to be running it on the internet, you're looking at places that are going to have traffic, whether it's in a strip mall or whether it's in a standalone building, but it's on the side of a road with a fair amount of traffic around other commercial businesses. If you have an actual commercial space, then just having that physical presence and having signage in your storefront, it is its own marketing. The more traffic that commercial space has, or the more premium it is in that sense, the more you're going to pay for it. So there is that give and take, obviously. But when you're running your business online, then one of the things you have to realize is that your online business is just as close or just as far away as any other online business, which is to say, basically, a few keystrokes and a mouse click. So you have to find a way to differentiate yourself from other businesses who are selling the same things you're selling. And that's not always easy for someone, for the consumer or the customer to see if they have just thumbnails and a typed or written description. It's not to say people don't do it. Lots of people have online businesses or online retail businesses, and they do well. But you really have to be aware of how you're marketing your business and how you are making yourself stand out.
Aside from what you've already mentioned, what would you say are the most important things to know before you establish an online retail shop?
Um, I think this is true for online retail, but it's also probably true for, I don't know if it would be true for most business startups, but it's a common thing that people don't seem to think about, which is that running, in this case, an online retail business, it's going to require all of the same skills and energy or time commitments that running any kind of business is going to have. So that would be things like basically the back end administrative side. If you're running an online business and you're doing it because let's say, just because we hear about this a lot in this office, you let's say somebody wants to do the handcraft items. It doesn't matter what those are, and they could be really talented at making whatever it is they want to sell. And they could have a large variety of well-made items. That's great. That's going to help them a lot. But they still have to be able to keep their books. They still have to be able to at least have an understanding of record keeping, because maybe they're not going to do their taxes themselves, but they need to have good records for whoever is going to do those. They're still going to need to have some understanding, kind of what I was saying earlier, of marketing and getting the word out and getting attention for their business, getting the online traffic that they're not getting from the physical traffic of a storefront or a commercial location. So a lot of people will go into business because they have a passion for whatever it is they're going to be selling or making or whatever service they're going to be providing. And that's important. That's great. But it is really a small portion of any kind of business. So not to make this about me, in a previous life, I ran a small business, and we don't have to talk about what it was. But a friend of mine who was in the same kind of business uh, made a good observation one day. He talked about he used the example of bookstores. So if somebody loves books, so they want to open a bookstore, that makes a lot of sense. I love books too, and I love to hang out in bookstores. I think it would be fun to spend all day in a bookstore. But you still have to run a business. You happen to sell books in your business, but whether you're selling books, whether you're selling jewelry, whether you're selling clothing, whatever it is you're selling, the fundamentals of running a business are going to be the same. So for your online retail business, don't underestimate or lose sight of those fundamental business practices that are going to help you last or get through maybe some of the leaner times, or just keep yourself sane, because you know what you're doing, you know when you're doing it, you know how you're doing it. And I think personally at least it's a good way of minimizing some of the anxiety.
You've just given us some really good information on the sort of things that you should be concerned about when you're setting up a business. What would you say are the most common obstacles that new business owners face in running an online shop?
I would say kind of some of what I've touched on. It is really it's a combination of visibility and differentiating your business, making sure your business is visible to people and they know you exist and they can find you. And when they find you, they choose your products, your inventory over what the person in the next online retail business over is selling. Kind of in a way, you can think of it as instead of thinking of it as running your business online, just as a sort of as a visualization here. Imagine you're in a mall and every business in that mall is selling the same kinds of things you're selling. So how do you get people to come to your shop in that mall when there might be 20, 30, 50, in the case of the internet, functionally an infinite number of other businesses that are selling the same things you're selling? So visibility, and then capitalization, meaning capital, operating capital for your business. A lot of people don't understand that we know that most small businesses don't last, but one of the main reasons for that is because they launch without enough capital behind them to get them through those initial stages where they don't really have any business because they haven't established a reputation. They don't have any kind of brand recognition. People don't know they exist. Visibility takes time, and then you also want to build a reputation so people, when they see you, they trust you and they associate what you're selling with a quality product. So making sure you have enough behind you to get you actually into that sort of escape velocity, more or less, and making sure that people see you and are aware of you. So I mean, you can do that a number of ways. I kind of mentioned earlier. I think social media is an obvious one right now, but also, well, it's somewhat through social media. Something if you can find a social media group that is specific to your area. So you're not that way trying to blast it out to the entire world where somebody who's in South America may not care to buy anything from you. And that's fine. There's nothing against you or your product, right? But giving somebody some kind of hook and local businesses is a good one. I think that's something to keep in mind at least.
Can you talk a little bit about sales tax?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to mention that and then I forgot. Thank you. So yeah, and that fits into one of the difficulties or things to be aware of or things that people may struggle with an online retail business. So sales tax is going to differ, or at least have the possibility of differing from state to state. We're lucky here in Oregon to not have sales tax. So as long as you're selling to somebody who lives in Oregon, it's a non-issue. I can't really be specific to other states because they're other states, right? Our office, our program, we're here in Oregon. But be aware that states who have sales tax, which is the overwhelming majority, I think Oregon is one of only two, I want to say, who two states who don't have sales tax now. States who do have it and who subject online sales to it tend to use thresholds. So there's a dollar amount where if your sales exceed that dollar amount, you are subject to sales tax in that state. Or if you exceed a certain number of sales, then you're subject to sales tax in that state. Now, on the dollar amount, it's not like whether or not an individual transaction exceeds a certain amount. It is total transactions to people in that state. So I'm going to pick an arbitrary number here and know that it may apply to whichever state you're thinking of. It may not, and you need to check to see. But let's just say it's $100,000. That means when your cumulative sales to people in that state exceed $100,000, your sales are subject to tax. I think most of the time it is all of your sales. It's not just the sales after you've crossed the threshold, but then everything is subject. Again, I can't speak for other states. I'm not an expert in sales tax, but that's a rough sense of how it works. So if you know you're going to be selling to people in California, double check what California sales tax thresholds are and how their criteria works. Now, if you're selling online, you almost certainly have a payment processor, someone who is actually taking payment for whatever it is you sold and acting as an intermediary, and then you get your portion after that. So talk to your payment service providers and see what they do and to what extent they do it. I don't want to speak for them. I don't want to say that they all do it or these ones do and these ones don't, but be aware of them as a resource at least.
How can someone get more information and advice about running an online retail shop and growing their business?
Some of the resources that we tend to direct people to, kind of regardless of what they're doing, but I think it's particularly good for this one, is um, the Small Business Development Centers, or SBDCs. If you're not aware of the SBDCs, they operate out of community colleges all across the state. You can find them online. I think in Oregon, it's just OregonSBDC.org. And then you can see where all of their different locations are. You can find phone numbers on there. You can get links over to their websites. You can send them emails. Another really good one is an organization called SCORE, which at least at one time that stood for Service Corps of Retired Executives. I think it might be kind of like KFC and those other businesses now, where it doesn't technically stand for that, but it used to. But their website is just score.org. And SCORE is, so the SPDCs are really good at providing classes that are actually run by local business owners or experts in particular skills or fields that are relevant to you as a small business owner or somebody who's running a small business. Um, but the SCORE as an organization, they have classes like that, but their real thing is connecting you to a mentor, somebody who actually has a one-on-one communication relationship with you, and they can guide you through whatever you're needing to do for your business, whether that's starting it, whether that's growing it, whether that's getting a little bit more established, whether that's selling it, any number of things. And they can match you up with somebody who is most appropriate for you. And the good thing about kind of where things are at right now technologically is that it doesn't really matter. You can be in Oregon, maybe the best mentor for you is in Oklahoma. You know, you can have this kind of virtual communication and they can help you through whatever it is that you're looking for. So whether you go to one of those or both of those, I would strongly encourage someone to at least look into each of them. But then small business organizations right there in your community are very valuable. So those are things like your chambers of commerce, local professional groups. See what's immediately available in your area and start building networks, because that doesn't only give you the opportunity to learn more about running your business, but it also gives you the opportunity to start getting the word out locally and building that sort of that visibility and building that brand and building that presence that your business needs in order to help it succeed. And if you need business to business services, you know, if you get to the point where you actually can afford to pay someone to help you market your business, well, another local company who you meet through some of those networking groups may be a perfect fit for you.
Well, this has been most informative, Greg. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. It was fun.